We are,
Sorry.
we are delighted to welcome Kelsey Brooks, coordinator for the Be Green Collaborative, which stands for Baltimore Regional Environmental Equity Network. Kelsey is a program manager with the University of Maryland Environmental Finance Center, supporting communities across EPA Region 3. She brings a wealth of experience across the Mid-Atlantic with roles spanning the Virginia Department of Environmental Quality, the University of Maryland and Maryland Sea Grant Extension, and the National Wildlife Federation. Her work has focused on green infrastructure, urban stormwater management, and broader issues of climate resilience and environmental justice. Today, she'll share insights from her work with Be Green Collaborative, a collective impact initiative advancing greening practices across the Baltimore region. Please join me in welcoming Kelsey.
Is it better with the mic or can everyone also hear me? You would like the mic? Okay, is the mic working? Okay, we will go with the mic then. Make sure my clicker is working. Awesome. Great. So thank you so much for having me here with you today. I'm really excited to be speaking with you about collective impact, our experience at Be Green, and how you all can work together to advance systemic change based on your work. So quick overview of what I'm going to be covering in the next 20 minutes. I want to set the stage with a definition of collective impact. Obviously, there are many definitions you could find, but I just want to make sure that we are talking about the same thing. I will talk a little bit about the network that I work with, Be Green, to give you a sense of how we're structured, our history, and where I'm coming from. I'll talk a little bit about why collective impact and how it differs from collaboration and partnership. Then some steps to grow your collective impact, the ingredients you need to have a collective impact initiative, and then talks through some common challenges that we see with collective impact, and some solutions that we can think about.
Kelsey, you might need the mic a little closer.
Okay, better?
Where you're going.
Okay, sorry about that, but thank you. So collective impact brings people and organizations together in a structured way to achieve social change. You might also see this as systems change. So this definition comes from the Collective Impact Forum, which is a great resource for collective impact work. They have a ton of additional resources as well, and I'll touch on that towards the end of the presentation. But I think the thing to really key in on in this definition is that social change or the systems change. So to get a little bit into our collective impact initiative, I know it's a little bit different from the work you all do. We are focused on urban greening. Be Green is a network of networks. It came together from 3 existing networks in our region: the Greater Baltimore Wilderness Coalition, which does a lot of work around workforce development; the Baltimore Urban Waters Partnership, which is a federally run partnership that brings together a lot of academics and practitioners focused on water quality; and the Baltimore County Green Alliance, which is Baltimore County focused. Our network participants work in the city and the county. And we also have participation from community-based organizations directly, although they also participate in each of the individual networks, and local governments. Our funder right now is the Chesapeake Bay Trust. We have a 5-year grant from them to advance this collective impact work. And our fiscal sponsor is Still Meadow Community Partners, Inc. If you're familiar with Still Meadow Community Fellowship in Southwest Baltimore, it's a church that has a 10-acre peace park. They're a great organization. They're also one of our community-based organizations. And a little bit about, too much. So yes, Be Green formed a little bit top down from this solicitation through the Chesapeake Bay Trust. These other networks were existing, and part of the impetus was to have these networks come together to be able to work more effectively and not have as much duplication. The network coordinator was hired in 2024, so that was a few years into the initiative, and I'll talk about that as something that you might want to do up front. And we're currently in year 4 of that 5-year grant. Initially, we thought it might end at year 4 because it's mostly federal funds, but luckily those federal funds seem to be continuing into our year 5. I would say that one of the challenges Be Green has faced has been a lot of staff turnover, and I'll talk about that as well. So setting up systems within your impact initiative to account for that. in case that's happens. We know at NGOs, sometimes staff does turnover. But I think we've gotten to a place where we've been able to really apply the theory of collective impact to identify that systems change level issue that we're trying to address. And that's fundamental to what you're trying to do, is that common agenda, what you're trying to address, what is the systemic change that is going to make work across your organizations easier. So getting into that a little bit, why collective impact? I want to talk about how it differs from just partnership or collaboration, not to say that that isn't important and something that you should be doing, but just to dive in to what makes collective impact different. So partnerships, the purpose of partnerships can include a number of different tasks. Information sharing is a very important part of partnerships. Joint programming can be an important part of partnerships. So working together with other organizations to put on programming in the same sector. So again, urban greening, we have a lot of people who are working to plant trees. So we might have partners who would come together to say, we're all going to do tree planting projects here. That's a great outcome of collaboration partnerships. But really you're building on existing organizational goals. So it's two organizations or more organizations working on the same set of programmatic goals. Collective impact is again more focused on that systems change. So what is the underlying systems blockage to the work that you're doing? I was sitting at this table a second ago, and there was already a great conversation about transit being a difficulty for the type of work you're doing. So folks being able to move around the city and the county with ease, that's a systems issue, right? And so that might be the topic that you want to focus on, and thinking about how you would build a collective impact initiative around that. And it might extend beyond the type of work you do. So one of our members, the Baltimore Greater Wilderness Coalition, as I mentioned, does a lot of workforce development. They're running into the same issue. You might not think of working with a greening organization, but if transit is this root cause, there might be opportunities to extend across the types of work you're doing to say, hey, we all know this is an issue. Let's all get together and figure out how to move this needle forward. And that sort of cross-sector collaboration is really important to collective impact as well. Again, not just organizations necessarily working on those same programmatic goals. And that can also be private sector, public sector, government, in that cross-sector in that way also. So I do want to show this diagram. This is the 6 conditions of systems change. This is from a publication called The Water of Systems Change. And I think what's interesting about this publication is it's directed at funders, actually, not at NGOs. With the idea that a lot of the discussion around systems change is also about shifting power dynamics. And so bringing funders into the conversation. I know in the introduction, right, talked about relationships. Building those relationships with funders is incredibly important, and seeing it as a relationship-based relationship. That's really redundant, but not transactional is important as well. And what this diagram shows, I'm not going to get too deep into it because you can get really into the theory of systems change, is there are sort of 3 levels of systems change. You have these sort of structural changes, which is what most of us work on. This is an explicit thing. So policies, practices, programs. Ideally, and this is hard to do, I don't want to say that any of this is easy because otherwise we would have all done it already. You're getting to these mental models, right? Really shifting how people think about whatever the system is you're trying to change. So again, conversations around transit, saying it's great that people can move around the city. It's great that people can get to where they need to go, as opposed to, hey, maybe we don't want these people moving around the city. That would be the mental model you're eventually trying to change. And so this is just something to think about. Again, you're not necessarily just moving those programmatic goals forward. You're trying to fundamentally change something about how a system is working. So what do you need to start a collective impact initiative? You need a common agenda that, again, is going to be those shared goals, that system identification of what you want to change. You want to have shared measurements. So I'll talk a bit about this too, in the challenges of setting up functional evaluation metrics. That is going to be both, again, aggregated programmatic goals. We're never trying to lose sight of that, but it's also going to be evaluation metrics about the system and then about the capacity of your organizations to do work. You want to see your ability to do your work and have your outcomes and impacts grow. You want to foster mutually reinforcing activities. Again, we're looking cross-sector. So how does your work and the local government you're partnering with and a corporation and maybe an organization that's working in a different sector, how are all of your activities moving this collective impact initiative forward? It encourages continuous communication, and we'll talk about that as well in the challenges section, but how are you setting up continued communication, information sharing? We don't lose that either in collective impact. It's kind of like partnership plus, right? And making sure that you have systems set up to have that continuous communication. And then finally, a strong backbone. And that's going to be your coordinating structure. So having dedicated staff that is making sure that the initiative is moving forward, that is making sure those metrics are being captured, that is making sure that if there needs to be changes, that happens, is extremely important. So sort of more narrowly, right, you're going to want to have someone who holds the money in your collective impact. That's your fiscal sponsor, or it can be one of the organizations. They're responsible for managing funds, they're responsible for taking in funds. As I'm sure you all know, a fiscal sponsor can be just like a fully separate organization that's all they do. They take in the funds, they manage the funds, they usually take like 5 or 10% off of any grant. But then you don't have to worry about your reporting and particularly right with federal funds, that can be pretty difficult. So they take that off the top, but they can also be a partner organization. They can serve as the backbone as well. So Be Green is one of 5 organizations being funded through this Bay Trust initiative. We have sister networks throughout the Mid-Atlantic. And within our cohort, we have a fiscal sponsor who is, in our case, a partner. It's our community-based organization, Still Meadow. Our sister organization in DC, it is also their backbone. So that's been functional as well. And then some of them just purely have a separate fiscal sponsor who holds the money. All ways work. It depends on what you want to do. Part of the reason that we have a partner organization as our fiscal sponsor was to help grow their capacity to manage funds. So they took that on. We've been supporting them as they learn how to better manage federal funds, which is beneficial for them in its own way. The backbone, again, is responsible for that coordination work. In this case, they can, again, be the fiscal sponsor. It's better if they're not a partner organization. The backbone organization should be neutral. So if they are someone who's also working and voting and deciding how to move the initiative forward, they're not going to be as neutral as they probably should be. So obviously this could be a financial hurdle, hiring dedicated staff to do this, but at least having someone in the coordination role is extremely effective and important. I think, again, we've all been part of collaborations where no one is specifically coordinating, and then you have your meetings and you guys decide what we're going to do, and then you come back 2 months later and everyone's gone, ooh, I was really busy, and things take a while to move forward. So having someone who can push that is very important. And then, of course, you have your partner organizations, and these are the participants in your impact initiative. I think the main thing to say here, and I'll say it again, is really make sure that roles are clearly defined so that everyone knows what their responsibility is. Again, I am sure we've all had the experience of going to collaborative meetings and you sit in and you kind of listen, and then you don't have anything you to really do. And so then you just attend the meeting month after month and you go, why am I spending my time doing this? And you don't want your partner organizations to feel that way. So having clear assignments, clear participation, how is everyone working together to move that impact forward helps engender participation, even though, you might say, oh, we don't want to burden people, we don't want to give them more work. Without having that buy-in, it feels like more work. It feels like meetings to have meetings, which is never good. And I know we're all full up on meetings. So some common challenges that can happen along the way. And I think I will say here to start that, again, if you do these sort of fundamental steps of setting up your structure, setting up your common agenda, setting up a good governance structure, you can avoid some of these pitfalls. I think a lot of these things crop up when that work is not done at the ground level. So starting with alignment in the common agenda, a challenge can be your initiative doesn't set this up at the beginning. You're meeting to meet. You kind of all have a sense of maybe what you're doing. You're all trying to advance Something like, again, in our case, it might be, okay, we all want to plant trees, but how is this different from existing collaboratives? How is this different from just the work our program is doing? Do we just show up and I say, hey, our organization planted 300 trees last month, and that's what I do at the meeting? Setting up this common agenda, identifying what the system is really important. So again, if you don't do this effectively, it's difficult to get buy-in from your participating organizations, because again, going to a meeting, you're not really sure what you're doing. Is it a valuable use of your time? How are you contributing becomes the question. You want to develop clear action plans out of the common agenda. So really sit and think through how you're going to move towards that collective impact goal. So these are difficult things to shift. These are difficult long-term systems change problems. You want to set up short-term wins, long-term wins, but having a roadmap so people can turn to it and say, okay, I know that these are the steps we're trying to achieve to get to where we are in the short term, in the medium term, in the long term is really important, again, to have people buy in and understand what they're trying to do. And it can be difficult to make progress, right? If you don't have a North Star, if you don't know where you're going, how do you know that you're getting anywhere you want to be? So this fundamental step, again, very important. You want to take your time doing this if you can. So, I mentioned we're in year 4 of our grant. We had a lot of change. It's taken us a while to get here. That forming, plan for it to take at least a year, maybe longer. Depending on how diverse your coalition is, figuring out those action plans, those roadmaps, how everyone is tying together their work is a challenge in and of itself. But if you don't have this North Star, more issues are going to crop up along the way. Okay, so maybe you developed your common agenda, but you didn't set any evaluation metrics. So your organization doesn't have clear ways of saying, hey, we're achieving this, or hey, we're making improvements. That can make it difficult to define progress and success, reinforce alignment so people can see again that their work is adding up to something, and then ultimately attract additional funding, right? Funders want to see metrics, so you want to be able to show, hey, we've done X, Y, Z, it's had this outcome. Metrics is an interesting challenge in and of itself for collective impact initiatives, right? There are usually traditional metrics that funders use. In our case, right, we have like trees planted, we have gallons of rain runoff reduced, we have number of volunteers engaged. Those tend to be the metrics that we're working towards. We're trying to work with the trust to say, hey, we want to see metrics around capacity for the organizations, and how do we define increased capacity once we've made these systems change, that our organizations are able to do more with the staff they have because they don't have these roadblocks in the way. We want to see maybe metrics around the system itself. So how do we say, okay, when we go into the portal with the trust, they have set criteria that you just fill in little boxes. And we want to say, we want a box that says policies change. We want a box that says ordinances. We want a box that says participation from local government directly with us. And that doesn't quite exist yet, but those are the sort of, again, systemic things that we want to see, that our fundamental relationship with our local governments and NGOs is changing. So that can take some time as well. But again, once you have these two fundamental things, it helps with the other challenges potentially. Communications, again, can be a challenge. So your initiative does not have regular and structured opportunities for communication. This can make it difficult to build trust across organizations. Again, especially if these are these cross-sector relationships. These are people you haven't really worked with in the past, or maybe don't know personally. This can include your funders as well, who should be brought in. And then again, maintaining participation can be an issue as a result of this. Again, there are numerous software tools that people like to try out to say, okay, we're going to use this software tool. It's going to allow us to communicate. People are going to get pings. People are going to get emails. Everyone's going to log in and see. I have found, and people can disagree, and maybe everyone has different experiences, that if there's something separate that people have to log into, folks are going to forget their passwords. They're never going to log in. You're going to spend money on a tool that no one uses. So I tend to think that it is more about structure, and again, that coordinator role to make sure that people are moving things forward and that you have personal touch points and check-ins, than some kind of fancy software. So if you can decide to spend your money on like a human being or technology, I tend to think human being. So yes, whatever sort of integrated Google, Outlook, setting things up through that so people don't have to remember their password is helpful. And we're all here in person today, right? Nothing replaces in-person meetings and communication. I think coming out of the pandemic, everyone's like, oh, great, we're just going to all be online and sit at our desks. And I found that people really craved in-person interaction more than ever. And that's the best way to build relationships. It's hard in a 2D space to really get to know someone, to have spaces for just personal conversation. So always try to make space for in-person meetings if possible. Managing workload. So, right, again, we have so many meetings. We all have completely full schedules. How do we build collaboration that does not just feel like another meeting, that is not taking up an hour on our calendar where we could be doing work? And I think there can be an instinct to rely on that backbone organization to do most of the work, produce most of the products, do most of the coordination. And that isn't necessarily the solution. So setting up that common agenda, those evaluation metrics, making it integrated into the work that each organization is doing, allows for that buy-in, allows for it to feel like it is part of your job, and then you'll be able to accomplish what you're trying to accomplish more efficiently. Because if you're just relying on a couple of staff people to move things forward, it's not going to become integrated into people's work, and that's part of the systems change that you're trying to accomplish. And one person is not going to be able to do as much as an entire coalition of people. So the instinct to rely on the backbone isn't quite right. The backbone should be doing the overall coordination, maybe having those touch points, certainly tracking your metrics. And again, if they're the fiscal sponsor, maybe keeping track of your funding. But you want to set up in your common agenda, in your governance structure, clear roles for people so that that workload is distributed. Managing workload is not about assigning it to one person. It's about distributing the workload so everyone can handle their portion. Funding. We all need money. In terms of setting up your systems change goal too, I think the instinct could be like, oh, if we all just had $1 billion, we'd solve the problem. That's not necessarily what we're trying to do. But definitely keeping up with funding, making sure that you're attracting new funders, diversifying your funding sources is important. And part of this is delineating how your work, your systems change work differs from your partnerships, and making sure you're not cannibalizing the funding of your individual partners. So that's something we have a lot as a network of networks in Be Green conversations about how our collective impact network differs from the programmatic work of our networks. There are definitely funders who want to fund collective impacts specifically. So if you're approaching those funders, you're not going to be cannibalizing the programmatic work of your individual partner organizations. And so being able to clearly articulate that is the best way to make sure you're pursuing funding that is not at the expense of your partner organizations. And then finally, navigating conflict, always difficult to do. Obviously, there can be different types of conflict. Maybe you have a personality clash, or you have a difference of opinion about how to pursue what you're doing. And again, setting up your common agenda, your governance structure, can be really important to addressing this. So if you have that North Star, you can say, this is what we're working towards. Which of these things is going to get us there? You have a personality clash. You can say, are we all agreeing that, hey, remember, we're working towards this. Which of these things can we do that makes this make sense? I think one thing I didn't put on the slide here too, right, is these collective impact initiatives are going to evolve. And so having that common agenda, that North Star, if an organization says, this isn't working for me, actually, I don't want to work towards this, it's fine to let people go sometimes too, and to have new people come in. So there can be a flow in that way as well. I think a lot of times, right, we're building something, so we want to hold on to everyone, and that's not always the right response either. A third thing is you can consider developing the capacity of your backbone to have conflict resolution skills. Again, they should be a neutral party. So they're not going to be a partner organization. It shouldn't be a case of like, oh, they're siding with these guys, and now we have factions, because they're not doing the work themselves. They're that backbone role. So that's just a few examples of things that we can think about as we're putting together the Collective Impact Initiative. In terms of resources, I mentioned the Collective Impact Forum, tons of resources, tons of PDFs, tons of worksheets about how to set up what you're working towards. So I really recommend going to their website. They're free of charge, most of the resources. You just have to like sign up and then you can download whatever you might want to take a look at. But they also do trainings and coaching. So definitely wanted to leave you all with that as well. But with that, I think we have time for questions.
Yes, yes. So we wanted to give you, before you go to our table conversations, we want to give you a chance to just ask Kelsey anything that you want to have more information about or clarification on. So we have about 5 or 10 minutes for that. Any questions?
So, I'm just wondering if you're going for a grant collectively, how does that work, and what happens when a funder, not the federal government, some other funder, private foundation or something, wants each organization in 501c3, and maybe your backbone organization who is managing everything has one or does not? How does this work functionally?
So, I mean, your fiscal sponsor should definitely have a 501c3 status or be able to hold funds. And that's part of their role, is to take in the money and then be able to fund work elsewhere. So that, right, if you have an organization within your group, and we do, at least one of our CBOs is not a 501c3. They can fund the volunteers through stipends or set up systems to be able to give money to those community-based organizations. And that's one of the real values of having that fiscal sponsor across the network. And then you also relieve each organization of having to find their own fiscal sponsor to hold their work. But in addition to the seeking funding for the Collective Impact Initiative broadly, we have seen success with subsets of our organizations coming together to apply for more traditional grants. And one of the organizations is the lead applicant. They, explain in the grant that we're working with these different organizations. They're going to do work here or in different locations. And, just explain that clearly in the grant. We've seen success with that as well. Does that answer the question, Joyce?
Any other questions for Kelsey?
Clear as mud.
Well, and I'm sure there's people in the room who've had some experience with this. So, if you wanted to just share sort of amplify some of her points with your own experience, interested in hearing that too. Yeah.
I'll talk impact from Prepare. I worked with the BWGC, which is, was a collaborative that went on for 2 years with the AG's office and the Office of the Public Defender. There wasn't money involved, but it was bringing together organizations across the criminal justice space to try to create systems change to make our systems run better. And it involved government agencies. We were able to pull, because it was we were able to pull everybody to the table in a way that usually does not happen. And it was structured exactly like you said, each committee, you had the chairs of the main group, and then you had the committee chairs, and then you had subcommittee chairs. All, subcommittees were producing the reports, which were being sent to the committee. The best ones were being sent up, and the best of the best made it into that final report that you see. So I have seen that work very, very, very well. The challenge that I've seen, and I'm trying to think of how to form a good question out of it. When I've seen other people try to do something similar, but they have a funder or somebody that has an agenda. The thing about BWGC and what made it so effective, and I list off the bills that have come and the policies that have changed, it was very effective. It's sunset, which is unfortunate because the AG had different priorities with some of the other changes. But when I've seen funders try to do this or groups try to do this themselves without that super neutral party, I often see that drift that you're talking about. So it kind of from my experience, is there a way, have you found an effective way to get that neutral party engaged? Like, how do you, as somebody who does have an agenda, and I recognize I have an agenda, right? But I also recognize the value of that neutral party, even if we don't always agree.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. And I think it's really important that funders are here today. And I tried to touch on that with the Waters of Systems change slide of part of the systems change is that power structure. And so ideally, right, your funder has an agenda in the sense of you're like moving towards, again, an agreed systems change, but how you get there is not necessarily the question. And having a long time horizon. So not 1-year grants, not 2-year grants. One of the benefits of our system is that we got this 5-year grant to really figure this out and then gain momentum to seek additional funding. But finding a champion is really important. And yeah, I don't know that I have a great always do this and then you'll have a neutral party, but bringing the funders into the conversation is part of that systems change we're trying to achieve as well. And so great that you're having those conversations today with the funders. Yes.
So in those longer term projects where you've got a 3-5-year grant, what's your advice on navigating that when you have a partner that is not meeting their goals that have been defined? How do you work around that and hold them accountable so that the entire project itself doesn't derail by year 3 because one part of this partnership is clearly not doing what they said they were going to do, no matter what the reason is? I mean, it could be staffing, it could be many reasons, but how do you handle that?
So depending on how essential that partner is to the systems change, I guess is part of that question. Because as mentioned with the navigating conflict, sometimes the answer is they're not a good fit for the collective impact initiative that you're working towards. And as a group, you need to find either a different partner who can fill that role or recognize that they're part of the systems change that you need to wrap into your common agenda and your work plan of, okay, this is actually also a roadblock to what we're trying to achieve. How do we, as a rest of a coalition, address this? And maybe it is, we need to advocate for more staffing if it's like a government partner, or work with council to say, hey, this role needs to be different. But yeah, I think recognizing that partners might not be a good fit is difficult, and having that built into your governance document of, hey, if you're not meeting these expectations, it doesn't make sense for you to continue to be here. I don't know if there's other guardrails to put around that to respond to that question, but I definitely found it difficult to say we're letting you go, because your partner's probably in your programmatic work as well, right? So there's elements of that relationship where you're not going to stop working with them, but the depth of their participation might be different.
Then also, from a funder's perspective, you want to bring that funder into the conversation if that project is predicated on dollars being allocated. So you bring your partner in or your funder in those conversations, say, we have to make some changes, and here's why. So that way they're like, okay, well, I still believe in your project, I still believe in funding you. You guys probably will meet more often because as a funder, I'm going to meet with you more often now that you've brought this issue to me. So just make sure you include everybody in that conversation.
Yeah, you should talk to your funder all the time, right? Check in.
Yeah.
Yeah. Your funder is your friend, not, your supervisor.
We try not to be.
All right. Well, thank you very much for setting us up. And what we'd like to do next, as Bobby pointed out at the beginning, is have some table conversations around a set of